Remember that the goal is to run a cloud builder whenever a trigger is detected. Well, this raises the question, how does Cloud Build know which cloud builder to run? Well, the answer lies in a Cloud Build configuration file. We tell Cloud Build which builders to run in a cloudbuild.yaml. Cloudbuild.yaml describes the cloud builder to be run and what arguments should be passed to the entry point command defined in the corresponding Docker file. We do this with two things. First, with name, and second, with args. The name is the URI of the corresponding cloud builder container, and the args contains the arguments to be passed to the entry point. So how do you trigger the build itself and execute all the build steps described in a cloudbuild.yaml file? Well, we simply use the gcloud build submit command, pass it the cloudbuild.yaml file, as well as some what we call substitution variables, which we'll discuss a little bit later. So let's take a look at one single step, one single cloud builder in the configuration file. We have, first of all, the name. Again, this is simply the URI of the cloud builder container in container registry. So here we say, I want my first step to execute that Docker cloud builder container. We also provide args, which are just the arguments to be passed to the entry point. We actually have a third field here, dir, and dir specifies the current working directory within the container from which the entry point will be run. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at this dir field. The dir field allows the use of persistence. Okay, this is very important. Imagine that we run each of the steps, each of these containers individually. Well, each container has its own file system, so the assets that might be created, produced, or returned within the container directory during one step might not be available to the next container. This is a problem because some of these steps might need some assets. For example, a container might compile some code, and another container might push that code elsewhere. In a situation like this, you need persistence and some asset sharing between containers. By default, the current working directory will be /workspace, and any assets that are written here will be shared across all the steps executed during a build. If you change that directory to something else, this is no longer the case. So you have to be very careful if you change this directory. Another important and very useful mechanism for the Cloud Builder is substitution. Cloud Build allows you to substitute variables before each of the individual Cloud Builders are run. So in your cloudbuild.yaml file, you can use variables with a $sign followed by an underscore and a variable name. Then when you invoke the gcloud-build command, you can replace these variable values through the substitutions command line argument. This is incredibly useful for creating generic and reusable configuration files. So what exactly is the difference between the cloudbuild.yaml file for a custom builder versus for a standard builder? Essentially nothing. The only difference is that the container URI will probably point to your own project container registry. The rest is exactly the same. Simply pass whatever arguments you want to the container, specify the current working directory that you want the command to be invoked within the container. Another commonly used trick is to have our configuration script take in inputs from environment variables. And we'll actually use this in our lab to compile our Kubeflow pipeline. Cloud Build needs a way to specify environment variables when it runs the container. So to do this, we have the env field, where we can specify the name of an environment variable, as well as its fixed value. You'll frequently use environment variables in conjunction with substitution fields. These two mechanisms combined really help us create generic and reusable Cloud Build configuration files. We also need to tell Cloud Build to push the container that has been built. Very often, and especially with machine learning pipelines, you'll have to build and push multiple training containers. To do that, you need to first build the containers using the standard Docker Cloud Builder. Then, in an additional field, you need to specify the tag of all the containers to be pushed. Now, note you don't actually need to specify where to push these containers because the location is already given by the name of the container image that you built. If you forget this field, your container will simply be built, but not pushed, so not available in production. So it's very important to remember to push.